Hey, how's it going? Everybody doing all right this morning? Getting started good? Anybody here for Jeff's talk first? Jeff Fritz's talk? Okay, cool. We're going to extend a little bit on what Jeff did. We're going to talk a little bit about Aspire, just a little bit at the end. We're going to walk through a couple of phases of it. But I have some friends here in the front row, Matthew and Byron. They are from the PAS teams, and they're going to help us out with a couple of extended demos that we're going to do, talking about functions and some exciting stuff coming in app service as well. Again, this talk is about harnessing the power of Azure inside of Visual Studio. My name is Brady Gaster. I am the PM for the Azure tools inside of Visual Studio. I work closely with our PaaS partners as well as closely with like the Azure SDK team, the Azure MCP team, which you'll see me use briefly today, not a lot of AI today. And with a lot of folks in the VS Code teams, because they actually release a lot of Azure extensions for VS Code as well. So we tend to kind of stay in cahoots and understand what all is happening. Most of the time, the service teams do a pretty good job of letting us know changes that are going to happen so that we can deal with it in the tooling most of the time. So hopefully we'll find some of those opportunities today. As always, your survey is welcome, especially if it's kind. Especially if it's productive, you know, like let us know things we could do better next time. This is my first time doing one of these in about 2.5 years, so I might faint. I'm not really sure yet, so see how we can do. But I want to thank my guys for coming and helping us today. So what are we going to talk about today? I like to tell a story from the perspective of a Visual Studio and Azure customer. I like that because that's who I was before I was a Microsoft employee. I was a contractor for about 18 years. If you've ever worked in like short-term contracts, 3 months here, 6 months there, that was kind of the jam that I did. A lot of startup work, a couple of government jobs and whatever. And what I found over the years working with the tools, and then over the years here at Microsoft, working with the tools, is that there's kind of this continuum of people, you know, like this process that you're always going on. And what I want to do is imagine some of you are going to be at this point, some of you are going to be at this point, some of you are going to be at this point. And what I'm going to try to do is to cover that entire like game, if you will, of like building applications using Visual Studio for Azure, and show you some of the older tools that we've got that still work really, really well, and they're more secure today. We'll get into that in a moment, as well as some of the new tools. And then we're going to move into things like .NET Aspire, and we have to talk about AI a little bit, just a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about AI. That's when Byron will come up and do some pretty exciting things later on during the presentation. But what I like to do in these is to really get started by talking about a really simple app. I've got a really simple app. I will be completely honest with you. I coded maybe 10 lines of this app myself. A lot of it was vibe coded. I am not that good of a designer as much as I pretend to be on TV. It did a better job of doing this UI than I ever could have. Byron can back me up on this. He's seen my UI in the past. So what I can tell you is that I did a lot of the coding you're going to see today directly from within Copilot, but we did do a lot of the coding ourselves. So you'll kind of see what it looks like. So the first thing I've got in Visual Studio right here is just a really, really simple web app. It's really just the front end. I'm just going to go ahead and hit F5 and show you what this looks like. I do have a lot of bookmarks for some reason, so I'll get rid of those as not to distract you. And what's going to happen is this application is going to spin up, and there is a text file that contains a series of titles in the form of, say, a title tag, and then a series of URLs. And each one of those URLs is an RSS feed. Anybody remember RSS? Am I showing my age here? Syndications? Okay, cool. Anybody remember Google Reader? Were you as devastated as I was when they killed it? Okay, so I'm building it again. So this is the idea behind the reader. It uses arrow keys so you can move through it pretty quickly. If I were to hit refresh real quick, got to say hit refresh in a Microsoft demo. You see it's really fast. That's because it's all cached. I'm actually using memory cache. So what happens is at runtime, I have this file on disk. The file gets opened up. We load all those URLs into a memory cache, and then we're off and running. That file lives right here. You can kind of see that I have titles and then a URL for each feed underneath of it. And then in my code back here in services, I have like this feed source. And then in my feed source, I think I've got file feed source that just opens it up and just reads it from file. That's all well and good. But what we want to talk about is Azure. So we want to talk about how we get this application on Azure. Now, a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine started this trend. I haven't forgiven him yet. I have to forgive him a little bit because we share a name, Damian Brady. Damian Brady came up with this awesome logo and a sticker. It said, "Friends don't let friends," of right-click publish. Forever, I tried to get him to put "to production" at the bottom of the sticker, and he just wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't do it. So I'm going to start off by deliberately upsetting Damian if he's watching, and I'm going to right-click publish this, but I'm not going to go through the whole entire process. So the first thing we do is we enable you to do a right-click publish experience from within VS, and you're going to see that this is going to spin, and it's going to say the workflow is already finished. That's a secret I'll explain in just a minute. Before I do, I'm going to go ahead and hit New Profile. I'm going to walk you through what this would look like if you wanted to create a new development environment just out in your Azure subscription so you could party on it, see how it's going to run in the cloud. You would essentially just go through this experience. We're going to give you the ability to deploy either to Azure Container Apps, to App Service on Windows if you have Windows dependencies. If you're running .NET Core, you could deploy to Windows. Actually, you deploy to any of them, Windows, Linux, or wherever else. We're going to be deploying to Linux today. I'm going to actually use my Linux guy here because I've got the Linux App Service PM over here. I want to make sure he sees what I'm doing. And what I would do here is I would click Next, and it's going to give me the opportunity to either create a new site, or I could select an existing one. I'll go ahead and click Create New to just kind of show you what this would look like if I were to do it live. I'm not going to do this live. I'm not going to go through the publish because we have a lot of material to cover in an hour, and these guys want some time as well. So I'm not going to actually right-click this all the way through, but I could create, my own hosting plan. This gives me the opportunity to select from all the different sizes and SKUs that we have, as well as all the different regions, which for some strange reason, it thinks of me as a Canadian. It always picks Canada Central first. This is always my default. I can't figure that one out. I don't get it. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to select a new one. I'm going to select an existing one and just click Next. And this is the part that I'm excited to show you. I'm going to show you two things real quick. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to actually generate a GitHub Action workflow file so you don't have to learn how to write YAML, right? Because no .NET developer likes writing YAML. All right, here. Any .NET developers that love YAML? Yeah, I didn't see any hands go up. So I'll select this and I'll click Finish. And what that will do is that will actually go ahead and create my published profile, and that will lay it down the disk in my GitHub folder and the workflows folder directly inside of my solution tree. I've already got one there, and I've actually already run it. So you'll see that this is going to pop up in this new one that I just generated right here. You'll see it's reader, this guy right here, reader dev frontend.yaml. But that's not the one I want. The one that I want is the one that I've already created, which is, where did it go? Oh, this one right here, frontend.yaml. So you'll see it says that that's already run. I want to go ahead and pop open the repo link for you real quick because I'm going to give you this code today. If I were to go out to my repo right here, sorry for not having it pulled up. It's a really creative URL name, reader. So my GitHub name is Brady Gaster because I'm super creative. And then the name of the repo is reader. So if you want to get to it, it's right here. Now, what you'll see in this application when you start to clone it is that we've actually got 6-7 different branches. And each branch is going to be, as Jeff Fritz talked about, a safe point in kind of the flow of the demos and how they're going to work. So if we happen to fall into a pit of failure, we can just flip to one of those branches and be off and running. But that's not why we're here. Remember, I showed you this workflow file that's right here that's actually already run. I did this last night to make sure we had environment working. You can see that I actually have two guys. We're going to get to functions here in a second. But if I click on this front end, you can see that the first thing that happened was we actually cloned the repo, built everything. If I had any unit tests, I would have run all those unit tests directly inside of the GitHub action, made sure that the site works. And then when I go to deploy, you'll see that we actually log in to Azure right here, and we deploy that web app all the way out. Now, if you go through this experience in Visual Studio 22 today, Dev 17 is what I'm calling it, Dev 17 Preview 14 or whatever it is. If you go through this today, you're going to see that we are outputting a non-OIDC compliant GitHub Actions workflow. So that is the last time we're going to be doing that. We are shifting gears in our next update, which is coming very, very soon. Sorry. I actually tested it last night to get this action workflow for you last night. But what it's going to do is it's going to sit on top of OIDC auth, which is more compliant with what the service teams are doing. And it's also aligned with, if you saw Jeff Fritz do AZD pipeline config, it's more aligned with what you're seeing there. So we're moving some of the VS publishing stuff kind of closer and closer to the AZD world to be more akin to what they're doing. Idea is, as you'll see here today, I'm just starting with a web app. Matt's going to add a function to it, but as we grow up, we're going to have a bunch of additional stuff, and people want to deploy that using CI/CD with OIDC. And once they get into AZD, they're not going to want to make a lot of changes. So what we did is we're changing the way we're generating those files so they are OIDC compliant. If you look in the workflows folder for this repository today, if I go here to reader, in every one of the branches, for GitHub reasons, I've got this GitHub workflows folder. You'll see that I've got the front end, and when Matthew does the functions, you'll see the function stuff as well. I've gone ahead and put these out there so you can see what these look like today. We're going to begin outputting this style of file in the very next release, which we're already testing now. So it's going to hit the street really soon. I just want to point that out. Today, you would have just normal AZ login. Tomorrow, you'll have the OIDC compliant stuff, which actually is a lot better. Okay.
Your pipeline file upgraded did both the build and the release, but the ADO splits those out conceptually.
It does.
Is that like a shift in paradigm, or is that?
That's a great question. So his question was, my workflow file does the build and the release all at once. If I were to open that file right here, if I can edit this file, you'll see that here are my jobs, here are my steps. So my first step does do the build and the test and then the publish to get my publish artifact. And then my deploy runs here and goes all the way down. Whoop, I don't want to do that. Goes all the way down through this. Now, you could split this up into multiple files if you wanted to. You could have one file that does your build, one workflow essentially that does your build, one workflow that does your deployment, et cetera, et cetera.
Even if you imported this in a regular pipeline, it would just be doing both steps.
It would be doing both steps. Yep, it would be doing both. It would be. And I'm glad that you mentioned Azure DevOps. Any Azure DevOps users? Okay, in that next release that we're going to be putting out soon, we're going to give you this for ASDO too. I know you've wanted that for a long time. I'm here to announce officially that in that next update, you will have this support inside of ASDO. There's one experience variance between what you saw with GitHub Actions and what you'll see with ASDO. When you saw what I did with GitHub Actions, it goes ahead and publishes the workflow file out, and it writes that workflow file such that it will run on a push to that branch. I personally can't stand that. So I always change it to workflow dispatch, so I just have to run it myself. When you get this for ASDO, you will get the pipeline file, but you will have to bring that pipeline file in and create a pipeline in your ASDO instance. We don't just do that dance for you today. If you were to get that pipeline file on disk using the upcoming feature, you could use the ASDO MCP server from within Visual Studio or VS Code to actually do it too. Yep. You pump it right there. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the introduction to our simple app. The way the app's written today, if I wanted to do any kind of tweaks to like the list of feeds, I would have to do something I don't want to do, and that's download the code, change that text file, and redeploy the app. I don't want to have to do any of that stuff. So what I want to be able to do is to add storage. Again, we have a lot of material to cover, so I'll probably just flip over here in a second. But what I'll show you next is we have this concept in Visual Studio called connected services. The idea behind connected services, we've had them there for a while. We support about 12 different Azure services and some other things. You can essentially right-click your project and enlist any Azure services that you want your project to be able to talk to directly from within VS. So right here, I could right-click this connected services node, or you can go in directly to the entire the thing here, and I could say, if I can find, where is it? Add, where is it? Not there. Shoot, I'll do it the way I always do it. I'll right-click connected services, and I'll say add, and I'll just go right here to Azure Storage. Am I blind? There you go. Azure Storage. So this will pop up, and it's going to give me the option if I wanted to use Azure Write, which is going to be your local emulator if I don't want to party in the cloud. I do want to party in the cloud. I want to go ahead and create a live Azure resource right here. I'll go ahead and click Azure Storage, and I'm going to create a new one just for giggles. I'll just leave the default name alone. I'll call it live. Just leave that one as live. I'll put it into the same folder. Why is in Canada is beyond me. It's going to be in West as the resource thing. I'll go ahead and hit create. And what will happen now is it's going to go out and it's going to actually create a new instance of that storage account for me in my Azure subscription. And then it's going to give me the option to do some stuff to my code, to do some stuff to my project. I'm going to show you what that is because that'll be really important later on when I flip over to the phase 2 in just a second. So what it's doing now, like I said, is it's going out and provisioning a new resource group. It's going to drop that storage account into that resource group. And in 3, 2, 1, it'll be ready. I don't want to push that button again. Next, and you'll see here that this is called reader queues. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set up 2 different storage accounts. I won't do that in live today. I'll just flip over to the done state and show you. But I'm going to create 2. One of them is reader queues. One of them is reader blobs. In my case, I'm just being really pedantic, and I'm setting up 2 different connections to the same storage account. Someday I might want to split that across 2 different storage accounts, so I'm explicitly using 2 different connection strings that point to the same place. What I'll do is I'll just click next here, and on this screen, this is really important, and actually skipped one really important screen that I'm going to show you here in the form of a slide. 2 little surprises that you might have missed already. So what we're going to do first is we're going to offer to inject code into your project. We're also going to offer to set up all of the NuGet packages that you would need in your project to be able to access storage. And then we're going to do 2 really, really important things. We're going to inject secrets, if you will. They're not as much of a secret as they were in the past. I'll show you a slide about that in a minute. They're actually just the endpoints for each individual blob, queue, and table service endpoint. But the way you authenticate to those is using managed identity. You don't authenticate to them using a key on disk anymore. You don't authenticate them using a secret that you could inadvertently commit to source control. You authenticate to them using managed identity both from your machine and when you're in the cloud. So what we're just saving to disk in your secrets files and secrets JSON is actually going to be those endpoints. And then the final thing we do is we use Service Connector to go out and configure that storage account so that my account using Visual Studio has the rights I need to be able to save files and create queues in that thing. When you publish it, we can actually go ahead and set up your published resource with the appropriate roles so that your actual compute resource, your app service, your container app, your function can communicate back and forth with that storage account just fine. If I click next here and go ahead and finish, it's going to go out and hit the cloud and do all the things for me. And then what I would do is I'll flip over to the done state and show you some stuff. So I'll finish up. Got to show you some live stuff, you know what I mean?
Why that's going with Aspire, is there any way when you're hooking these up to tell it to external dependency?
Yeah, with Aspire, yes.
I know you can in Aspire. Is there a goal for those to integrate it where it's automatic? It goes through to tie it in. That's
Sort of.
At the solution level, and this is for your setting up the service dependency.
Yeah, for individual projects, yeah. Well, you do that in Aspire too. You set things up in Aspire project by project as well. You've got your app host with all of your hosting stuff, and then each one of your client projects would have your client integrations. So you do still set it up, project by project in terms of the client ad. The app host has everything, but we'll get to that. We'll talk about that. All right, so I've gone ahead and set this up, and what I'll do here is I'll show you a feature that I've used Visual Studio longer than a lot of the people I know have been alive. And I just discovered this great feature. If you right-click your project and you say Manage User Secrets, we actually put some of these URLs directly into your secrets for you. This will not be committed to disk. This is local to your machine. There's a GUID that basically connects your project to this file, which is not directly in your source tree. You won't accidentally commit it. And what else is really good is before we would inject actual secrets into here, not just endpoints. We would inject the URL as well as the key that you would need. So if somebody got a hold of your secret file, they would have everything that they needed to get into your storage account. Today, they don't anymore. They've only got the URL and they'd have to auth, and that's a lot harder to fake. Just to show you what we've done there, I'm going to go back over to this little slide and show you. So this is an example of us running that GitHub Action workflow. You'll get all of your YAML over here. You can see that your pipeline is run over in your actual published well. We'll do all the same stuff for you when it comes to ASDO in the future. And then these 2 screens right here, I wanted to pull up This first one you saw, and you might not have noticed this. Has anybody ever right-clicked to app services before this session? Have you ever tried this feature before? If you had, this might have surprised you recently. Okay, so the app service team made a change due to security recently where they turned off the default of basic authentication. They turned off basic authentication as your default way of authenticating up to app service. The reason for that is security. We have a lot of stories about that we won't go into right now, but let's just say for security, we did it. They reached out to us, Spyron reached out, and he said, I need you guys to do the same thing in VS. We don't want customers to inadvertently turn on basic authentication when they're doing their publish if we've turned it off for them. In fact, we don't want you to let them turn it on at all from VS. So in VS today, if you don't have basic authentication turned on when you go through this flow, you can't turn it on. If you go through this flow and you turn it off, you can't turn it back on again from within VS. You can go to the portal and turn it back on. No, we're not sorry. It is by design. We want to help you be more secure. So there's that. Okay, so if you were surprised by this, no pain, you'll be okay. This side over here, much bigger change. And every one of these connected services a while back, you would see the connection string along with secrets and keys and everything else, we would drop directly onto disk. If it was SQL Server, you would see your password right here inside of this, and we would put that into a secrets file. Today, we no longer do that. We're only putting the endpoints. You can click this link right here, which is really small and hidden down here in the bottom corner very deliberately, and you can get back to a place you don't want to be, which is moving secrets around. But we deliberately wanted to make that convoluted for you, because we want you to be in a secure place by default and to stay there. Cool. So back to the code over here in this phase where I've added storage. One of the things that you will see is that if, go ahead. Oh, shoot. What's going on? That's weird. That makes no sense.
You're an extended.
Huh? What happened? There it goes. Sorry about that, yeah. Not good at this stuff. So what you'll see here is this is the code that we have after we do that, that add storage account thing. First thing we do is we drop in this file. So you saw up at the top in the flow, you would see the code that we inject. First thing we inject is this file, which basically gives you a series of handy extension methods instead of actually editing a lot of your program CS code. But we do make one small change in your program CS code right here. And this might get to the question that you were asking a minute ago, sir. If you see up here, this is where I'm reading in these connections, these URLs, these endpoints to all of my different storage account areas. I'm actually using stuff from the Azure SDK team. So when you think about what gets injected into my DI layer, what gets injected in my DI layer when I do things like this Azure blob feed source is this class right here, Azure Client Factory. So when I'm using Aspire, what gets injected is the actual client. So instead of me getting Azure Client Factory of blob service client, when you use Aspire and you start using the Aspire integrations, you'll just get the blob service client. Why am I showing you this way? You might be on your journey to Aspire and you've already used connected services, and this is what your code looks like. So what I want to show you how to do is to ease in Aspire, and then you can kind of go along as you have time. It's five or six changes per project if you wanted to go the full way of using the Aspire client integrations versus one change at the root and then no changes per project if you just want to continue to use what you've already got. So I did want to point that out. You can kind of ease into it. Do you have a question?
So right now we're using the arms or bicep to generate everything. So is there a way to just select like the existing storage and have all this stuff added as well? Or that kind of a complete workflow?
Well, if you go through connected services, you can select an existing storage account, right, or you can create a new. Right.
But will like all this be added as well, like all the URLs and
everything? Yes. You can pick, if you pick a storage account that already exists, you still get that box at the end that says, what do you want me to inject? You can turn things on and off. Like what you saw here is if I were to go through it again, I would turn everything but secrets off. So the only thing I get in my code is secrets because I've already got everything else in my code. So that kind of shows you that. So At this point, what I've got is a scenario where I can, instead of me loading that text file every single time from disk, I'm going to load it from a blob. Now, why is that relevant? Because I might want to update my cache whenever that blob changes. So if somebody were to come along and add a new feed and just save that blob file back into that blob container, I would want some sort of a trigger to run that would then call my application and refresh my cache so that I get all those new feeds. And Mr. Henderson is going to pop up here and show us how to do that using functions. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Yeah, oh, I can too.
Desktop 2, right?
Here too, yeah.
Sweet. Cool. Yeah, so Brady asked me to make this event-driven. So we're going to start reacting to things as they get added to this blob store. And to do that, we're going to use Azure Functions, which is going to scale nicely in response to those events. And we're going to get started by going in and adding a new project. So I'm going to go New Project. And I can't help but notice that we're missing Azure Functions from the pinned list. So we're definitely going to fix that later. But we'll go ahead and search for it, grab it here. And then we're going to call it reader.serverless. So that's going to get us going, and we're going to pick, let's do .NET 9. Let's live on the LTS. And we're going to pick a new function to get started. So here we're talking about blobs. So let's go ahead and do the classic blob trigger. I'm not going to use the event grid version though. I'm going to find the regular one, which is up here. There it is. So I'm not going to do Spire. I'm not going to use Azurite. We're going to just connect directly to that storage account, and we'll show you the existing flow there. Connection string. So I'm going to name this reader blobs as well, just so that things are nice and consistent. And I need to make this reader-feeds. And we're going to hit continue dependencies. So this is also service connector right here is as part of the project flow. So we're going to go ahead and get that going. And it's going to start scaffolding things out. You'll start seeing the project land, and then you'll also see connected services engaged. So we're right back into where we did adding a storage account. So I'm going to click Azure Storage, and momentarily I will see the one that Brady created earlier. So we'll go ahead and select that. Reader blob sounds great. It's going to give us all those endpoints. Again, not committing any secrets. We'll use our local developer identity to get things going, and it'll set up all the role assignments appropriate for that. So we should be good to go there. Let's go ahead and hit finish. And let's have that close when finished. So this is going to drop in everything. In fact, I also didn't go through the next flow, and I should have, because then I could uncheck some boxes. That's okay. You're just going to see a couple other functions get injected along the way. Well, actually, no, sorry. We'll do that when we do the next one. I'll just make sure that I don't click finish right away. So we can see we dropped in this function. Let's go ahead and name it something a little bit more interesting. So we'll do a little control RR and do feed list update trigger. So what we can see here is we have a function. Do some standard DI to get a logger in, that's fine. But then we have a actual method here. We've marked it as a function, and we specified a trigger. And this trigger binds to a stream. So we're going to get the stream data of a blob, and we're getting that blob from this container, reader feeds, and then we'll get the name of it from the path there. So the name of the file, and that will be passed in as a parameter, name. And of course, we're using that same connection. Nothing fancy here. This is all great. So we've got that connected. But we can see that first off, if we can do manage user secrets. So we got the ones here, but Azure Functions has another dependency. So there's a runtime storage dependency, and we didn't click the Azurite box earlier, so it didn't put anything in here. This is a local settings that comes for the app. We don't want that here because we're going to do this exact same thing. So let's go in and do the exact same flow. We'll go in connected services, add storage. We'll just do the exact same thing as we did before. We'll just give it a different connection name. So grab live. Here, we're going to name it Azure Web Job Storage, which is the one that we just had. I'm not going to click finish. And instead, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to drop the code files out because I don't want to get a bunch of extra functions added. But the rest of this is all fine. So we'll go ahead and hit finish from there. So again, just going through, connecting things through, really nice and quick. As we build things out, we can start just continuing to add resources. So now we have everything that we need for the function to get started, except we need to make sure that those user secrets are loaded. Now, should be from the default. We'll take a quick look. So program CS, things should come in from the builder, but we can be nice and explicit. This is, standard way I would set things up for a .NET application. Nothing too fancy here. Just using a default host application builder rather. And let's just do a quick builder.configuration, add user secrets. Which is not getting IntelliSense, which makes me a little scared. Yeah. Okay, it had it. Maybe. Sorry? Yeah, but it's the method's not resolving, so that's the interesting. There it is. I was just complaining about the methods. My bad. Yeah, so just bringing this in just to show it a little bit more explicitly. I needed to be better about typing though. It's the joy of a live demo, and I think that's going to also need a quick using. Yeah, great. It's complaining about nullability. Whoops. Lovely. So we're good to go. Yeah, great. So just quick adding that in just to make sure that we get those user secrets. I also should double check and show you that we did add in Azure Web Job Storage endpoints, the exact same storage account, nothing fancy, but again, separating those connections is useful in case we want to split them later, like Brady was saying. So we're good to go, but we also have 2 projects now. And so in order to debug properly, we need to make sure that we actually launch them all at once, because I am very guilty of consistently hitting F5 and only getting one default project. So we'll go in and set multiple startup projects. The front end, we'll have it run the start action, and sure, HTTP is fine, start action, and then the function here. So now both of these will launch when I hit F5, so I'm going to do that. Now, the blobs are already going to get created by the application as it gets started. So what we should see is that as the function gets going, we'll have a log start coming in from that default function that just, we got started from with the template. So we'll see things load, we'll see the function list, and then we should see an executing line that's going to actually process the blob that the web app is going to have pulled in from its startup. What do we got here?
Might need to copy the secrets over to the
front end?
yeah to the front.
Oh, was this not the same instance?
Yeah, you might have.
Oh, well, let's just see real quick. Let's check the user secrets on this one. Oh, I did. Huh. Manage user secrets. Those are all there.
Is that queues or blobs?
It's blobs, right? So. Oh, that is queues. Ha, you're right. That's exactly it.
Just copy them all and change the blobs.
Yep. I'm just going to copy it from here, actually. It's all the same. Great. So now we have that in there. Let's try that again. So we've got our demo failures out of the way. So the rest of the session is going to go fully smooth. You're welcome, Byron.
Yeah.
So now the web app's going to load, and we'll still have the functions runtime starting here. So that's the old instance. Let me grab the new one. There. So great. So actually we see it right there. So I have my function logs here. Blob trigger is loaded, and then we can see that it actually processed a blob and from the URLs file that got added by the web app, and then it logged out the output of that file. So very simply, we just got started reacting to things happening in our system. So now as data is added, as new events are raised, we can start doing things in the background. So that's well and good. Now we want to do something a little bit more interesting. So let's go ahead and take a look at a pre-baked one that's been developed a tiny bit further to do something a little bit more interesting. So not too different, honestly. So we still have sort of our standard, we're injecting a logger. We still have the same function here, but we now have a queue output because we've added the connection for that queues connection as well. We're still reacting to the same storage account, but we're going to, instead, we're going to actually start putting that message into a queue. And so that allows us to set up asynchronous processing of a different kind. It allows us to have a little bit more durability around the handling of those events and how we want to sequence them if have a bunch of blobs landing all at once. So now we can start processing that queue in a separate step. But this kind of like IO bound workflow is very common and very something that's really nice with functions. You can certainly do things that are a bit more CPU intensive and things like that, but it's good. It's good to also just make sure that you're shaping your data and your events in the way that your application can expect for different components, especially as you start adding more and more projects or layers to the application. So I think everything looks good here. Let's go ahead and publish it, and we'll do the exact same kind of thing as before. We'll right-click publish because that's what friends do. And then we're going to go ahead and add a new profile. I'm going to go ahead and choose Azure, and I love the function app here because that's the type of project we're looking at. Let's do the create new gesture just to see what that looks like. So similarly, we're going to get some defaults filled in to provision this out. Yep, it's going to try and put it in the same candidate central place. Great. And we're using the flex consumption, which is our newest SKU in functions. It's going to be scaling dynamically, but with a lot of different controls that allow you to have a lot more flexibility in terms of networking support and just general scalability. It's going to set up the storage account for that Azure Web Jobs storage as well. Helps us provision. We can map things over, and also application insights as a default, so that you have some nice logging for your compute. Make sure you're keeping track of everything. So that's great. We're not going to actually provision one. I'm going to go through the exact same flow here of picking an existing one, and we also have the GitHub Actions and soon to be Azure workflows. Now, again, same thing as before. This flow is going to try and do some secrets, which is not the way we want it. That's going to be changing, and it's going to move it towards that flow where it's going to use a federated identity credential to actually do everything with identity, no secrets required. So we're not going to let that complete because we don't need to go that. We've got that pre-canned and we'll be ready for the next steps. But real quick, let's go ahead and jump back over to slides. And Brady promised AI, so I'm here to talk about AI. The thing I wanted to talk about is Brady mentioned MCP earlier, and MCP is the Model Context Protocol, and it's going kind of wild. It's a fast evolving spec, a lot of community contribution, and where it fits in is in agentic applications or dev tool chains. And so you can have a couple different ways of bringing in context that allows a language model to do more. And so the classic agentic loop is you have something that's going through interacting with an LLM and is bringing in both the model, its instructions, like what we're telling it to do, and then a set of tools that allow it to do other things, or get data, or things like that. Keep some state, great, but the classic interface that you're going to deal with is some sort of messages. So you're going to throw a message into chat, that gets combined with the base instructions, and then the agent's going to do something, interact with the model, and then get something to spit back out. And you go back and forth. So the question is, hey, what about those tools things? How do I make these things smarter? How do I customize my own GitHub Copilot to start doing things a little bit differently, working with things in my organization, my data, or maybe I'm building a separate agent and I want to build something there. So if that sounds interesting, we have a couple different ways of doing it. In functions, we have another trigger. So we looked at a blob trigger earlier. Now we have an MCP tool trigger. You do not need to know the details of the protocol in order to get started. But there are a couple things you should know. The way we define things in MCP is it's natural language. So what I have here is I have a, look at the laser pointer out. I have a name that I'm giving it. So I'm telling it, hey, this is what the tool actually is. What it does is it's going to save a code snippet. So right here, I'm just making it so the GitHub Copilot knows how to say, hey, I like this, please save it, and then I'll get it back later. And then I can, integrate that into my workflow as I go. Then I need to give it arguments. It needs to be able to pass things in. So we define tool properties. So similarly, I have a name that I'm passing in and a description. Now here, because I'm referencing it elsewhere, I'm just saving it as a constant. But I also need to give it a type so it knows what that data needs to look like. And this is what allows the LLM to know, how to actually take whatever context it already has and then pass that into a tool. And that could be coming from the user instructions. Similarly, I just need to be able to get the actual contents of the code snippet with its name, and I'm just going to say that here I'm returning it. So we saw this actually with the Q trigger, right? I have an output binding, and I can just use the return type. So that's going to say, hey, map the return of this function into this type. And so I'm just throwing it into blobs here. This is just a quick example. We're not going through the whole of that MCP tool trigger today, but if you're interested in trying to play around with some of that AI stuff, want to maybe tune GitHub Copilot a little bit, this is a pretty simple way to start doing so. And we can just find a lot more at the link there. That takes you to our documentation. Just search for MCP tool trigger Azure Functions. You'll get there too. And I also want to point out, so there's a whole ecosystem of SDKs, and there's a bunch of samples we also have for doing the exact same types of stuff on app service, so it'll look more web app styled. So both great options if you want to get started playing with some of that stuff too. But anyway, I think we need to get back to the actual main application. So I'm going to give it back to Brady so he can do so.
Thanks, Matt. I haven't messed with those MCP servers yet in Functions. I've done some in the C# SDK, but I've not done any of the ones in Functions. I need to try some of that stuff out. But where I've been spending most of my time is in what you're going to see right now, which is around Aspire. So have you been to any Aspire sessions? Has anybody tinkered with Aspire yet? You just dipping your feet in so far? Okay. 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 Anybody in production or even close to production with you? Okay, cool. Good. You're exactly where I hoped you'd be. All right. So what I'm going to show you now is how to take your existing stuff that you've been building along the way. You've been using Azure, you've been using .NET, you've been using VS, and all of a sudden we come out with this new thing called Aspire, and we tell you, you have to use this. And you're wondering like how much code change you're going to need to make to be able to use it and how the tools are going to help you kind of get started. Well, today what you see is we've got the front end project and then essentially the back end project. And like you saw Matthew do a little while ago, which branch am I in? I'm in the right one. You saw Matthew go over here a little while ago and go here to properties. You didn't even know this existed until the other day. He would actually right click each project and go to debug. But you have to go in here and you have to set each one to, tell it which order you want to start. I would always forget that. Anybody else forgotten that? You run your front end before your back end and like things don't work. Oh God, what did I do now on the database script? So, okay. So we're going to make that easy for you. So essentially you would right click your project. We'll start with the front end. You would right click your project directly inside of Visual Studio. You would go down here to add, and not this one, I want to point this out. You don't want to pick container orchestrator support. That's the bad guy. It's actually a really good guy. But what you want to pick is the other orchestrator support, which is right here, .NET Aspire orchestrator support. So I'll back out of there and do it again. Zimit is not my friend ever. I'll say .NET Aspire orchestrator support. It's going to say, hey, I need to do some things. What do you want? What do you want to call your project? So the first thing it's going to ask me is the project name prefix, reader, and it's asking me where I want to put it. I want to put it in that folder because that's our phase 3. That's fine. And you can see right here that it's going to create for me an app host project and a service defaults project. So I don't have to create either one of those on my own. It does something else that's really cool too, which I'll show you here in just a second. So we'll let it go ahead and lay down that app host project and lay down that service defaults project. And what I will show you now, if I go over here to the app host CS, look at there. It's already orchestrated that front end project for me. It already knows what to do to get that front end project dialed into this, Aspire orchestration topology right now for me. And I only have to do that again, right here on the serverless one. And I can say add .NET Aspire orchestrator support. It's going to say, hey, I already have an outpost and service default. I know, I just told you to make it. So I'm going to click OK again. And you'll see now it will go ahead and lay down that functions project for me right here in my thing. Now, all good. If I can build, did I get the right package? I did. It brought the right package in. So at this point, I've got essentially an Aspire project ready for me to F5. And when I F5 that project, it's going to go ahead and start up the function and that front end for me automatically. And you can see that we've already made that app host project your default starting up project. So we should be okay. And if I just hit F5 right here, making no changes whatsoever to the code. Now remember, we've got our storage account stored in the user secrets for each one of those projects. We've got a live storage account. So theoretically, they should be able to find their storage account, even though I haven't used what we call an Aspire integration for storage yet. Looks like serverless might have a little bit of a problem, as I haven't pumped in web jobs yet or something. Is Docker running? Is that my problem? Hopefully Docker's still running. Yes, it's running. So I wonder what our errors are here. Oh, okay, this trigger update. So you can see that if I click on that front end, the front end should work. We might not be getting the updates from the function right this second. But what we should see is that that front end should load because it would hit that blob service, that blob account up in Azure automatically for me since I've already got it wired up. Now in this case, Aspire isn't injecting really any secrets or any environment variables into either one of these. See, there we go. So the app's actually up and working. The function, I need to do a little bit of additional configuration, which we'll get to in a second. But at this point, we've already got this project is fired. I could go ahead and commit the app host and the service defaults projects, commit my solution, I'm off and running. Okay, so at this point, I'm ready to go. We haven't added any integrations yet. I'm going to ease into that a little bit slowly, just to kind of show you what that would look like. Let me close this down. And again, just like Jeff showed, and you'll see in other conversations, you've got all your traces built in right here. One thing I would call out is since I have not tuned my tracing, you're going to see all of the back and forth between Azure storage in my trace window right here. If I wanted to, I could go into my app settings and tune that down to maybe warning or error only. And then I'm only going to see problems whenever for some reason I can't actually access Azure storage, and it's going to be okay.
To go into this little Aspire project, you have to manually hook everything up.
That's a great question. His question was, if I were to go into my project and manually add Aspire, so I added my own app host, and then I added my own service defaults, I could right-click them and orchestrate them again. I could, now, like you saw before with the function one, I did the front end. It was already orchestrated. It was already there. So then I right-click the function, it orchestrates it as well. So you can retroactively add in app host project and the service defaults project, and then you can orchestrate it for workload from within. So we do give you that feature. Now, if I wanted to publish this, which I'm not going to do right now, what we do in Publish today is we actually sit on top of the Azure Developer CLI. So have you seen anybody shell out and do AZD, init AZD up? We're doing all of those same things directly for you inside of VS. We actually sit on top of AZD. So I could click Next right here. And the format's going to be a little bit different for what this looks like because it's very AZD specific. Let me back out of that. I want West US, and now my environment, I'm just going to call it Reader Live 2025-08-05, and I would click Finish right here. And what it's going to do is it's going to create an AZD. It's basically do an AZD init on my hard drive in this project folder and get me ready to do an AZD publish and, an AZD up or an AZD service deploy. So what this means is I don't have to individually right-click publish those things all up one at a time. Once they're in Aspire, I can right-click publish and it all goes up at once. Byron's going to have some exciting demos here in a second. Before he does, I want to move into one more thing, and that is the idea of adding what we call integrations, Aspire integrations. So I'm going to show you what that looks like from a procedural perspective right here on screen, and then I'm going to flip over to kind of the done state of that and walk you through a little bit more details. So I've got storage is the only one that I need today. If I wanted to, I could add application insights as well because functions is already wired up for application insights. But what I want to do right now is I want to add the storage integration for Aspire so that my app host kind of represents what I'm going to need in terms of my storage account and so that I could pump that connectivity directly into each one of these individual services. So I have to do a two-step process here. The second step, we won't go into too much detail, but I would essentially right-click my app host project and I could say add .NET Aspire package. That's really just going to open you up to the NuGet experience, and it's going to have this filter already preset. You'll see right here, owner Aspire. We got a reserved word on that Aspire thing for packages that prefix with Aspire. And then that hosting suffix at the end, that basically says I'm looking for something that I want to put into my app host. So at this point, I would do a search for storage. And you'll get back the Azure Storage guy right here. I could click Install. that is going to drop in my Azure Storage hosting library. You got to accept a bunch. And then we can actually start writing code around adding blobs, adding storage support, adding queues, and that kind of thing. Now, I'll just walk through that code briefly, and then I'll flip over to kind of the done point. So what I want to do first is create a new storage account. So I'll just say var storage is equal to builder, and I'll say add Azure storage. Now, that's really just my storage account, reader storage. I don't necessarily, care as much about that storage account as I do about the individual services that I can use in my storage account. One of those being blobs, the other being queues. So here I'll say blobs, let's say reader blobs is equal to storage. You can tell I'm really used to typing on a keyboard on a laptop. Storage dot add blobs. And I'll call this guy reader blobs as well. You'll see it's going to give me a couple of different permutations that I could do. I'm just going to copy that one, and then I'll change this one to reader queues. And I'll change this one as well. And AI is trying to help me. And now what I can do here is I can put a new line after this, and I can do a with reference. I'll just flip over to the done state, show you what it looks like. It's more interesting anyway. So I'll flip over here to this one, which is where I'll flip over here to this one, which is where the done state is. And if I open up that app host, you'll see kind of where I was getting started. I've got my storage account right here. I've got my blobs and my queues, and you can see that I'm calling run as emulator. There's a reason for that we'll go into in just a second. And then down below, you'll see that I'm pumping in all of these wait fors and these with references. So what with reference does is that will take the endpoint for that storage account and inject it as an environment variable into any of the services that are referencing that resource back again. What wait for does is it waits for this to be alive before it starts this up. Idea, let's say you're talking to a SQL Server database, and the SQL Server database is in a container, or a Postgres database is in a container, and you want to download that database container, and then you want to run EF migration, and that takes like a minute and a half. You don't want your web app to come up and like the database not be there. That's why you'd use wait for. You would use with reference to get a connection string to go back to it. Do you use them together? Yeah, just use them together. Makes sense. And you can see down below, I've done the same thing here. Now, what you will see here is that I've done these weird with environments. Now, remember our source code, we got started using connected services, so we have these environment variables directly inside of our code. So I'm just passing these environment variables in so I don't have to change those two projects. Later on in a future phase of this experiment, we'll get rid of those strings and we'll add what's called the Azure Storage Client integration, which makes the syntax inside of the front end a lot simpler to follow. So you actually have things like add blobs and add tables and that kind of stuff inside of your client projects, and it does make life easier. I don't think I followed your recommendation, Matt. I think I might have taken out your permission things. Let me make sure. I think I have a reason there, and they're actually here. Now, in this experience, I want to point this out, and then I want to give Byron the floor. In this experience, what I'm doing is I'm setting up my storage account up at the top, setting up blobs and queues. I'm passing a reference, which is a connection string, to those blobs and those queues in two different ways. I'm going to get it here, and I'm going to get it here in this format, and I'm waiting for those to spin up. Now, when I were to create this using AZD up, I'm going to get a series of resources. I'm going to get that storage account resource as well as some stuff to actually house all my code, like my container app instance and everything else. What I want to be able to do is to set the role assignment on this compute instance. So my function running in Azure Container Apps should have these roles on this storage account right here. Without this code, we don't actually set those roles appropriately, and you might get runtime errors when your code tries to access that backend resource because you haven't set up the roles. Remember when we go through connected services and that last step is use service connector to set your roles? That sets your roles for you logged into VS. This sets your roles on that resource for your code running in Azure. So I just want to point that out. This is brand new in 9.4. This is one of our new features that we just shipped, as well as, I'm going to give Byron the floor right after I'll say this. This right here is how you would deploy an Aspire application into Azure Container Apps. You basically specify, I want a Container Apps environment, and then down below in each one of your project resources, you would actually say, publish as container app. And if you wanted to customize it, you could. But at this point, my function won't be a function running in PaaS. It will be a container running in Container Apps. And my front-end web app will also be a container running in Container Apps because I said I want to publish them as a container app using that Container Apps environment. But Byron has something really exciting and very, very super preview. And I will turn it over to him to let him show it. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Brady. I'm going to do a quick switcheroo here. But while I'm doing that, I want to make sure all of you guys are still awake. So how many of you are using Aspire and writing microservices today? So one or two. So we don't want you guys to be the only ones having fun. I'm assuming the rest of you are still writing N-tier style applications, and that's your bread and butter. And there's a lot of goodness in Aspire that we want to make sure that traditional developers are able to take advantage of. Like just what the dashboard does, you don't need to be writing a microservice to take advantage of that. And that's kind of like what this push is coming from, and it's coming from customers that are using App Service today that are going and asking the Aspire team, hey, we want to keep using App Service, but we want to get all of the goodness of Aspire. And this is just to ground you, an architecture of the app that I have running. We have a web front end, we have the Aspire dashboard, and we have a connected service which is the cache, as well as a backend API. And there's a bunch of networking glue in the middle that holds all of this together so that the only public-facing endpoint is the web front end. Where did we go? The web front end. Your dashboard is behind auth so that only you can sign in and it's not publicly accessible. And your API and your cache are only accessible through the VNet because security, all the things, right? Okay, with that, let's take a look. So the first thing is, we don't want you to change the way that you're writing your code today. This is a PR that all I'm doing is I'm grabbing an existing project and I'm changing the target publisher to be App Service instead of the default, which is ACA. So if you're looking at this, the only thing I'm changing is in app host and in the CS proj, which is I'm including the right NuGet package to target App Service. And this is because of the work that the Aspire team did to enable multiple different publishers or having the option to target different publishers as part of the framework itself. And the next thing is, here's your whatever boilerplate Aspire app. And the only cool thing to call out here is, hopefully you can see this, it is actually hosted on an Azure website. So this is something that you couldn't do before. You would have to go and crack open the solution and do a bunch of hokey pokey stuff. Now, all you need to do is change, 3 lines of code and you would have it up and running. This is what the solution looks like today. There's a couple of web apps showing an app service plan, and there's some auth to protect the endpoint. Now, the things that we're working towards is we want to get to the point where we have the Aspire dashboard working. That's not working today. That's the next big step in this journey. Now, the App Service team is using this as a driver for driving features into the platform, whether you're using Aspire or not. So for example, one of the things that we're looking at is east-to-west communication across nodes. So that is something that you cannot do today. A lot of customers have been asking for it. Aspire gives us a beautiful scenario to justify doing this work, and they kind of like just help each other out. So this is a little bit more advanced of what we think this is going to look like in the future. And it doesn't have to look like this, but this is just options, right? So in this scenario, I have the API, the dashboard, and the front end deployed as 3 different apps. I have an app service plan for each one of them so they can all scale independently, right? Your front end might need, 4 gigs of RAM, but your back end might need 16. And your front end might need 2 instances, but your back end might need 8. And we want to make sure that you have that flexibility. You could potentially deploy all of this into one app service plan, but if you want to, you should be able to deploy it to multiple. When you're making references to other services in ACA or in Kubernetes, you might be deploying a Docker container that has your Redis or a Docker container that has your Postgres database. In this model, when you're targeting PaaS, we believe that the right thing to do is target PaaS services. So we would be targeting the Azure Cache for Redis service and not just a container. And then you take advantage of the hosted service and all the benefits that that gives you without having to babysit a container by yourself. Okay, so I think that wraps it up for the Aspire part of the demo. But then the other part that we wanted to talk about is, how many of you guys have been asked to add AI to all the things? Give me a show of hands, right? And how many of you have been given an unlimited budget to do it? And how many of you have waived all of the requirements to have security and compliance around your data not being shipped to third parties, right? So nobody. So let's walk through this demo, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here that's interesting. So if you look, this app, it's hosted on App Service as well, and it's just a catalog, and we have like a bunch of products in it. And then I'm just going to click into one random one. And you can see that there's this AI-generated summary. And you see this in any retailer these days. You go to Amazon, you go to Home Depot, they all give you that kind of like summary of what other customers are saying. Now, I like this demo because it's not your traditional, oh, here's another chat app that's going to give me some stuff, but this is something that's going to do something. It's an interesting scenario, and we can do it thanks to some of the tech that's built into the platform in App Service. So let's take a look at what that architecture looks like. Okay, so in this scenario, I have a web front end that is talking to a product catalog that is sitting in a database. And every time that there's a review that gets added to any of those products, there's a hint that gets dropped into a queue. Oh, I have a bug in my slide. This should be a queue, not a product catalog. And then we have a web job that is looking at that queue and is going to do something interesting whenever there's an item thrown into that queue. That something interesting in this case is talking to an AI backend to then go and generate an updated review summary for that product catalog. So it's something that can be done asynchronously. Now, why is this especially interesting? I'm leveraging a bunch of different features that App Service provides out of the box. And in this case, we're using the web job that lets you run non-HTTP triggered interactions or executions behind the scenes. So it's similar to a function, except that the web job is executed in the context of your application. It can have access to, for example, the credentials to the database because they're just environment variables. And it can have access to the local host. So it can make local host calls. And that is interesting in the context of sidecars, which is the other feature that I'm using here. So in this demo, we're going to be running an SLM as a sidecar to your application. So your application, whether it's being deployed as code or containers, can have sidecars that are running exposed only on local host. So there's no network boundary. You're not going outside of the instance itself. It's running on the CPU that you're already paying for as part of your app service plan. You don't need GPUs to do this. And it's secure because, like I said, the data is not leaving your box. So let's look at it in action. Okay, so there's some review here. It says, customer has mixed feelings about the product. Some appreciate the high quality fabric and style of design, yada, yada, yada. But, it doesn't say anything about how the thing smells. So let's add that. So I'm going to say, I'm feeling good today. So let's say very good. This thing smells wonderful. Submit review. So very quickly, I come over here. This is my queue. If I refresh it, there's the item that just got added. Here's the web job. So, usually this would be triggered on a schedule, right? So I would be doing every so often or every time an item gets added to the queue, just for the purpose of the demo, and I don't have the patience, I'm just gonna run it. So the web job is now running behind the scenes. It's talking to the SLM hosted locally on my app. If I look at the logs, this is the one that I did before. I'm gonna refresh. I should be seeing a new one, hopefully. Let me do a hard refresh. Okay, so that might still be running, but you can see what's going on here. It gets the context, it summarizes, and it produces the new AI-generated review, and then gets pushed back to the database. So now when I go back to the product, if all of this worked right, now we see that it did update the summary, but it didn't do the smell. So maybe I did something wrong. Or it did? Oh, there we go. Well, there we go. Now we know that this smells wonderful. So quickly, I'm going to point a couple of things out. So I'm in the wrong one. That's what happens when you have too many apps. Here we go. So how do you get to the sidecars? You get to the sidecars, it doesn't really matter if you're pushing a container or a code-based app. Sidecars are there for you on Linux. And you can go to Deployment Center, Containers, add a container. In this case, we were using 5.4. So 5.4 is a small language model provided by Microsoft. If you wonder how did I do this, I go to Sidecar Extensions. We have a couple pre-built sidecars for you. You can see 5.3, 5.4. We're working on it, adding a couple more new ones. Bitnet is one of those newer models. And the cool thing here is you can run this practically for free, right? It's running locally on your SLM. You don't have to export data to a third party. You don't have to provision a bunch of GPUs, etc. And you can prove and demonstrate the value that AI would bring to your app, whether it's a new app that you're writing today or it's an old app that you've had for 10 years. There's not a lot to it. And now the other important thing is all of these models are API compatible with OpenAI. So once you're ready to go drive the Ferrari, you can get on the Ferrari because you've demonstrated the value and your investment makes sense. So, that's one of the scenarios here. And the other thing is, you don't have to be pinned to the containers that we provide. If you want to bring your own, you can knock yourself out. This is just a reference to a container repository. And, as long as you understand that it's going to be exposed on localhost, it's not going to be, it's not going to be accessible from outside of your application, and it fits those scenarios. Some of the other things that we do is we have blogs that let you know how to publish with do integrations with Datadog, New Relic, anything that would run an APM. This is a great scenario for it. There's people that are basically porting some of the behavior that you get with site extensions on Windows into sidecars. So that's what's happening here. And if you hadn't been paying attention to App Service over the last couple of months, this is a tour de force of some of the cool new features. And thank you, Brady, because I think you enable a bunch of this with the right-click publish for web jobs on Visual Studio, as well as upcoming support for just right-click publish Aspire apps to App Service. So I think that wraps up my part. Back to you, Brady.
Thanks, Byron. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. So in terms of resources, we have a lot of them through the VS Live site. The repo, you can go to the repo just to kind of show them that. I don't think we have any other slides. Perfect. You're good. You're good. I don't think we had any other slides I wanted to walk through for y'all. No, I think we're good. Again, the only resource that I have is the repo. Which again, I will pull up for you here if I can get up my things. And again, it's broken up into kind of the phases that we walked through today. If you try to do kind of a pull request experience to see like what the differences are, We couldn't figure out why, but it's just not working. So I can't figure that one out. It's probably me editing branches all at the same time. But that's kind of what we have for you today. We really wanted to kind of show you a grow up story, you know, starting with a simple web app, adding storage so that you don't have to redeploy it when you want to do something on an update, adding a function so you never have to touch it again. And then, you know, rubbing a little Aspire on it so you can distribute it and, you know, deploy it out using AZD and other things like that. I'll probably extend this a little bit. So if you have other ideas for this, feel free to send me an issue. With regards to AI wrote all of this, and it was really interesting what it did. I could walk you through that process, but that's a whole other session. And the last thing I wanted to show you real quickly, some stuff that we have coming soon. Matthew kind of talked a little bit about the idea behind some of the GitHub Copilot stuff. I'm just going to open this GitHub Copilot chat window up real quick, and I'm going to zoom in kind of right down here. And I'm going to do something kind of interesting. I'm going to Control 4. Again, I'm terrible at this thing. What Azure subscription am I logged into in VS? This is one that I have to do a lot because I have a lot of Azure subscriptions. You'll see it's actually going to go out and churn and give me back. It's going to tell me it needs to run some commands. So it's actually telling me it wants to run the AZ account show command. If I got tired of this, I could YOLO it and just say always allow or always in the session. I'm doing a demo, so I'm not going to YOLO it. I want you to see what it does. So it's actually going to run that Azure CLI command in the background for me. And if I tried this last night, if I had actually, there it goes. So I'm logged into Brady's Happy Cloud. So you can see right there, it actually does that. Now in the past, I would have to go through a series of windows to get an answer to that, or, you know, flip over to some other product to try to figure out where I was, or go to the CLI. Now I can just ask that MCP server and I can party on it. We have the GitHub MCP server in there, as well as we're going to be putting the Azure MCP server in the future. So you'll be able to do things like create me a bicep file for this web application, and it will just lay that to disk for you in the agent mode. So a lot of different capabilities coming with that. But again, I think we're at time. We're just about to be over time. I'm Brady Gaster. Thanks a lot to Matthew and Byron for coming out and giving us some talk about the past. If you have any questions, I'll be around for a little while, but I got to run across the street and do another thing. So thanks all. I have a great VS Live.
We're going to be at Ask the Experts as well, right? Well, at least I am going to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.